Hello. So first of all, to gauge the room, can I get a show of hands? Who's working in a startup as a founder of a startup or something like this? Hands up. No one. No, there. Hello. Investors? What does everyone else do? Students? Okay, fine. So this talk is a little bit odd for me, because usually I'm speaking about the stuff that I'm investing in, like the sexy things, like artificial intelligence and all those things. So speaking about the actual investing part, to me, feels kind of weird. It's sort of like, as you look underneath the hood of a car, and it doesn't look very sexy. You'd really rather drive the car. But anyway, so society's chrysalis was the topic of this track, and I looked it up, and it turns out there is actually an investment angle to it, because chrysalis comes from the ancient Greek word chrysos, which apparently is ancient Greek for gold. And as we all know, investors are there for capital returns. And this is something that is important to remember, because that whole investment model breaks down if you can't make money back for your own investors. Now, because this is so slightly new to me, I thought, okay, let me tell you how I actually arrived at this space. Because there's some investors that are bankers and that at some stage they become investors. My journey was a slightly different one. I started, I did the sensible choice. I went to university, I studied law. It's the stuff that your parents tell you, son, do law, medicine, something, and that will be something. I reasonably quickly thought this is a bit boring, and the interesting things in society and in life in general happen elsewhere. So I entered the trials and tribulations of startup life. I founded and co-founded a few companies, and until at some stage I joined a very, very early stage startup at the time called Skurloop, which is the biggest mobile startup that you have never heard of. We've had at our peak 450 million users, and frankly, no one has heard of this company because we were a middleware. Things then, however, went, when you're a startup entrepreneur, this is the stuff that you're waiting for all your bloody life. Then all of a sudden, your user numbers go up. That hockey stick finally is happening. And in our case, that resulted in an exit to BlackBerry. And I then had possibly the funniest, most ironic job title in all of BlackBerry world, because I was their global head of games, believe it or not. So I served my time there, and then but decided that the big corporate career was not really something I wanted to do either. So I left and started angel investing. I'm also advising a few companies. I've founded a few more things. But so I joined because I was, perhaps a fairly experienced entrepreneur at the time, as you can see from the color of my 3 hairs that are left. But effectively, I was a novice investor. I had absolutely no clue. And it's a very, very different ballgame. So I joined what today has become Europe's #1 education technology accelerator called Emerge Education in London, and also did some angel investing on my own, under my own steam. If you look me up on Twitter, it says I'm an angel with small wings, because I'm not someone who will write you the cool £1 million check. Because that started to become a problem just very recently, so recently that I haven't actually updated my LinkedIn yet, because the PR people weren't ready. But I've actually joined VC as a partner now, in order to basically be able to write those bigger checks and bring those startups a little bit further, because after 7 years of angel investing, now I think I can understand what that is. But anyway, why would you want to do that? And as a former entrepreneur, I went out and I thought, okay, I might have made most of my money in the mobile gaming world. But as much as I like it, and the beauty of working in the game industry is that if you go home in the evening, no one died. But let's be honest, the world doesn't change that much if that next game doesn't come out. So what I wanted to do going forward is have some impact and help impact on society and on our world happen. Also, however, I thought science and tech is cool, and what would be nicer, rocket ballet, anyone? How cool is that? So I thought, okay, if I can get a bit closer and keep hanging out with people who are a lot smarter than I, and at the same time help them fulfill dreams that hopefully will have an impact on society and this planet, that would be even better. And at some stage, I stumbled across this line, and this, to me, sounds, like straight out of the James Bond villain movie, right? So how can we master the addictive qualities here? So it sounds okay, that you will be making a lot of money with this. And, the people who said that actually did make a lot of money with this. This became a multi-billion-dollar company. Does anyone guess what this might be? It was the Sesame Workshop. So Jim Henson's Muppets alone, which was a spin-off, was a multi-billion-dollar company. So they were actually looking, okay, how can we actually turn this into something good? And when you look at, and over the years, there was a lot of research being done on the positive impacts on societal change that a children's TV show has actually affected. And this is what I really would like to do. Because as an investor, specifically now that I'm no longer investing my own money, where what could happen? If things go wrong, I would go home and I say, well, honey, I'm sorry, but the money is gone. I need to speak to my children. And says, look, that inheritance thing, that's out the window. Now, however, I would need to go to the investors in our fund, and I said, look, all this stuff on this being the next best cool thing, that didn't work out, which is scary. However, so the capital return is an important part, and only because something is cool and possibly good doesn't mean that as an investor I can invest in. There is a different asset class for that. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for funding, you basically have to take a long, hard look at what is it that you're doing, because if it is a great idea which is fantastic for the planet and it will save the craziness that we're going through at the moment, but will never really make a lot of money, then you need to speak to philanthropists and charitable foundations. Then venture capital is not the right funding source for what you're trying to do. Now, as part of my own sort of learning journey as a fledgling investor, I came across this thing that spans pretty much anything that I've been touching, and that was the realization of a very, very simple thing, that there are verticals and there are horizontals. And from an investment perspective, to invest in horizontal, usually you need you need deeper pockets, you need more time, you need a longer breath to do this. So my little angel stack of money only would allow me to invest in verticals. I thought, okay, I want to have an impact. What are the verticals? And I started off by looking at government budgets around the world. I thought, okay, so what are the big verticals on this planet that have the biggest impact? Where does all the money go to? And then, unfortunately, the biggest one is defense, followed by health and education. So these three are multi-trillion-dollar industries every year. So when I then looked at them, I thought, well, defense, do I really want to invest in killer drones and that sort of stuff? And I thought, well, maybe not. It's also insanely regulated and insanely expensive. Health, likewise, is something that usually takes a lot of capital or a lot more capital to do it successfully. So if I would come with my little angel check and say, could you, I don't know, create the cancer cure, then if no one else writes any checks, then it would likely go bust. So I thought, hey, education, right? Education is the single most impactful thing in in the world. If you want to fight poverty, if you want to have less wars, if you want healthier people, educate your bloody people. This is what lifts them most easily. In terms of bang for the buck that you would get, this is great. So this is why I joined Emerge Education as a venture partner and invested. So a lot of the little logos that you saw on my little life in a nutshell slide are education tech companies. But ultimately, this was about what actually does make a difference. And as an early stage investor and as an angel, you are like early as in here early. So I thought, okay, if I'm not focusing on trends that are quite a bit out there, then I'm likely to lose. Because if I invest at an early stage, I need to kind of like project forward at least 5 years when things will be relevant. Because at some stage, I would need that capital return in order to live. And then, whatever is relevant today may no longer be relevant in 5 years' time or in 10 years' time. And that is the huge risk. So this is why so many people are looking at meta trends. This is why we are playing buzzword bingo so much. This is why the MIT Technology Review tries their 10 trends of the year every year in order to basically keep probing what are the ones that we are actually looking at. And I then realized that the big differences, they really happen in horizontals. And that triggered my move up into VC. So as a venture capitalist, this is what I'm investing in. I'm investing in data, in artificial intelligence, because we have so much data and we keep generating more of it that only AI actually allows us to make any sense of it. Human-machine interfaces, because the more machines there are, we somehow need to be able to interface with them. Autonomous systems, and then on the health side, genomics and CRISPR we've heard about yesterday, and that sort of stuff. That's what I do, and I think that is hopefully the little contribution to society that technology investing can do. What you do need in order to be successful as brilliant founders, and this is why I want to know, so the students here, the startup people here, stick at it. This is what happens. Does anyone know who this is? I mean, you know who they are. That is Mr. Hewlett, and that is Mr. Packard. They are widely regarded as the world's first startup. This was their original garage. And if you happen to be in the Valley, I would urge you to actually go to this address. It's, I think, an American landmark today. That is the original startup founder garage. What is, however, I think even more interesting is that chap, Arnold Beckman. And if you're a chemist, you might know him. He was an entrepreneur in chemistry and invented many interesting things. But because he invented many interesting things and he made a bit of money with it, he also became one of the world's first angel investors, so to speak. And he was once approached by Mr. Shockley, William Shockley, Nobel Prize winner in physics, insanely smart man. And Arnold Beckman decided to fund Shockley. Now, unfortunately, Shockley was a genius physicist, but also an absolutely atrociously poor manager. And from a technology perspective, we could say, thank goodness for society and humanity, because Shockley was so bad, this led to these 8 guys leaving the room and the company in order to set out on their own. And every single one in this room works every day with devices that these guys invented, helped found, brought to the world. The traitorous 8 are the founders of Fairchild Semiconductors. And you may remember Gordon Moore, Moore's Law. That's that guy. I actually wonder why this is black and not white. Eugene Kleiner, if you're in venture capital, Kleiner Perkins has funded pretty much any large technology company in the Valley that you've heard of. The guy here at the front is Robert Noyce. He was the founder and CEO of Intel. Again, if you're a startup guy, the chap there, Julius Blank, he should be of interest to you. He effectively invented the stock option. Victor Greenwich, he gave the world's integrated transistors. So pretty much, this is the start of what we know as technology today. If you go, however, back even further, Lorenzo il Magnifico di Medici arguably was, and I'm sure, you know, in ancient Egypt there must have someone like him, but arguably was one of the first ones. You know, the Renaissance happened in Florence pretty much because of the Medici. And if you could, you know, if I in my little, this is my experience, could say I backed Michelangelo and Da Vinci, you know, done. What I'm trying to do is, maybe not the next Da Vinci, but try and hit some of the next meta trends. This chap, the fund I've joined, we were the seed investors and Series A investors in him. Stan Boland is the CEO of 5AI, who are basically reinventing autonomous driving, or rather autonomous mobility, and distinct to people like Waymo, who do this in Phoenix on a grid. They will actually do this in central London and the chaos of London traffic. So that should help sort as urban transport, which is one of the meta trends that I can see. My time is up. I'm done with this. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much.